Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to What?
What are we? Who are we?
I'm like, that's not how you say nourishing. That's not that word. Okay.
It's so perfect though. How perfect is that for this podcast?
Yeah, totally.
Nourishing? No, I vomited halfway through.
Oh my God, so true. Okay.
Go again.
Okay. Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is when you're scared, you can't get off the merry-go-round of sick kids. So we realise that we do have listeners across the globe. But here in Australia, we're currently in winter, in the throes and thrusts of winter. And coming off 2 years of lockdown, the colds, flus, multi-system viruses that are around at the moment as community for the first time in 2 years comes back together again. And we've just spent our first in Melbourne, our first 2 terms that have been full in 2 years. Yeah. So our first school terms, first, 6 months, 5 months, whatever it is, even 4 months of this year, without interruption, without lockdown, without isolation. Of all of the things, all of the schools, all of the activities, all of the parties, people coming back together. And of course, when that happens, particularly after a hiatus of separation, there is a whole lot of bugs and all sorts of nasty stuff flying around that is stuff other than COVID.
Yeah, so it's not like it's just COVID doing the rounds. It's like all COVID plus all these things.
All the things, yeah. So what we're witnessing, and I'm making the assumption that it is likewise across the globe, but we're just talking about our experience here, is that people are continuously sick. So we just want to have a conversation around that so that you don't feel, as Bridget has expressed, so isolated and so alone in that experience. And we want to have a conversation around normalising the frustrations that you feel as a woman and a mother who can feel trapped and burdened in that dynamic and season. And we want to then at the end have a very gentle conversation around looking at the universal principles and stretching our awareness so we can love where we're at a little bit more. Yeah. And find the benefits. But we really just want to do the mum friend thing first and be like, yeah, girl, I got you. Same here.
Yeah, which is kind of basically how our conversation started before we even hit record today, because it's like I'm recovering from COVID. We were both sharing stories of our sons and their symptoms of something that they've each got. And it's like, wow, this is a whole thing right now that we're navigating, in a winter season perhaps that we haven't kind of had to deal with quite as much. I mean, certainly my kids are the most sick that I've ever seen them, really.
Which is so fascinating, right? Because I mean, this is part of that nomadic lifestyle that we would have originally come from when we were just separate communities in our own little community bubbles, and we never experienced sickness because we were not continuously mingling with 1,000 different people and biomes and, all of the things. So we've just come from 2 years of COVID where I would argue we've all been the healthiest we've ever been.
Yeah.
In lockdown, in our own little bubbles, where we're just in our own little biomes created by our own families' diversity. And now all of a sudden we've been thrust into a wider community with everybody else's biomes, and all of a sudden our systems are really struggling to do that keep up. So it's a bit like, how there's that season of toddlerhood where they're just sick and seem to have green snot pouring out of their nose almost continuously.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Everyone's doing that.
Yeah.
And we're having to make up for that lost resiliency, really. And it's going to be probably 1 or 2 winters. For the winters, it's almost like the winters that we pulled ourselves away from that exposure is how long it's going to take to get back that capacity to be with that level of diversity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think that it's a little bit of a double whammy, or certainly what I can see is it's a double whammy, because we have just had 2 years of a really extraordinary circumstance that has impacted people's lives, mental health, and even physical health in ways that it never has before. And at the same time, there were pleasures there certainly for my family, we've never been healthier because we are a large family. There's more exposure, and there's more that then comes home into the family environment. So the bigger the family, often the more sickness you encounter.
Yes, because you've got more little people going out there and these other new environments bringing it back.
Right. Yeah. And the more you are social and the more your kids do things, right? The kid that has 5 extracurriculars is probably going to have a sicker family than the kid who has no extracurriculars.
Yeah, yeah.
So I also just want to reframe here for everybody that this sickness is part of wellness.
Yes, that's a really great point. Do you want to explain that, like how that actually is part of wellness?
This has been one of my lifelong greatest learnings as a naturopath.
Yeah. It's been a deeply humbling lesson over time, hasn't it?
Yeah, because I think, and look, I would say that the majority of our listeners, Bridget, have a high value on health, like you and I do.
Yes.
High value on parenting, high value on health. So what can happen when we have a high value on health is that we stick into we conform to another dogma, which is the natural health dogma that health and vitality are the pinnacle optimal experience of wellness and well-being. And that sickness means that I have dis-ease in my body, that I'm not doing something, that something is missing or lacking or, dysfunctional in some way. Mm-hmm. So that's a really hard place to be, because we have wellness up on a pedestal and illness in a pit. And therefore, how we view ourselves and others is polarized based on that, right?
Yeah.
Which means we're self-righteous when we're well and judge everyone who's sick. And then we judge ourselves just as harshly when we or our children are sick.
Yeah.
And look out at us and see the wellness people drinking their green smoothies and kicking it at their yoga class, and we keep elevating them higher and putting ourselves lower in comparison to
I think we must have to do more and to somehow get to this godly place again.
Yeah. And as a naturopath, this is back when I originally graduated and had my own clinic as a naturopath. If I was sick, I was so shameful about it that I would just cancel all of my patients for like family reasons or something. And now I look back and think, that is so messed up that I perceived and had picked up along the way in my training that I was unworthy as a health leader when I was unwell.
That you were only worth listening to or looking up to or learning from.
If I was the pinnacle.
If you were. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I've really spent, it feels like a lifetime reconciling, because I certainly even now have many, many, many flashbacks to when my dad was sick and traversing cancer. So if you don't know that story, he got sick when I was 15 and he was a naturopath at the time. So yogi, naturopath, we were already like a family living in that world. I already knew I wanted to do that. So we kind of bonded. That was our bonding place, was health, wellness, food, yoga, you know, that thing. And then when he got sick and was diagnosed with cancer, that journey went, he decided to completely avoid the medical system and went completely alternative health. And I wanted to do that journey with him, and he wanted me to do that journey with him. And so it was like he stopped being a father at that point, and we started being, I don't even know how to define it, but equals. And so I would come to every one of his health, consultations and retreats and all of the things. And I still have moments where I flash back to different, memories are so wonderful, aren't they? Is we think we've forgotten everything. And the truth is our higher self, I don't even know how it works, just spontaneously brings a memory forward at the moment that we need it in our life. Right? Like how wonderful is even that as a construct?
Gosh.
You never actually forget anything.
We retain whatever we're retaining and thinking about has some purpose for us.
Right.
Otherwise it would have gone into like long-term memory, or just would have been disappeared, like just gone.
No, back it comes. So I have all of these memories of just even back then really understanding that the function of health is dis-ease as well. And what I mean by that is, even as a naturopath, and particularly within the cancer world, actually, some people with some serious heart conditions too, the people that had that really strong kind of constitution, who like never got sick, who had an iron gut, versus the person who's hugely sensitive and sick all of the time and, all of that. So those two different types of constitutions. The person who was never sick, or who never gave in to sick feelings, or who could just soldier through or bulldoze through or whatever it was almost like their system didn't have practice at responding to the foreign body or the dis-ease. And because it was out of practice, it took a really long time before it responded to the thing. And often by then it was so severe that it was a death sentence of some sort. So what I came to realize was how beautiful it is to practice being sensitive and responding and having an immune system that's sensitive and practices responding, just like, doing the fire drills at school. That's kind of what sickness is when it happens in your body. Oh, we get to practice this. We get to build this. And in fact, I can be so sensitive to that nuance in my body that I know I'm not, something's not being masked or hidden in my body before it becomes so big. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's beautiful.
So I just have really sunk into how beautiful that is for our bodies to practice and see that as a function of wellness. No different to a successful relationship, has both challenge and beautiful supportive moments, right? Like a successful relationship has both. Because we actually grow.
Yeah, and a successful relationship is not devoid of conflict.
Right, this is what I mean, right?
Yes,
it has both.
Yes.
Same as our health. Our vitality is actually a construct of both. Because the absence of one is a disease.
Yeah.
So I just want to reframe that the fact that you get sick is a sign that your body is vital.
Yeah, that your body's doing the exact thing it should do because it's coming up against a pathogen or something that it doesn't know what to do with. So it's conserving all of its energy. So, i.e., you're now flaked out on the couch because it has to go and put that energy where it's needed, which is to fight that pathogen.
Yes.
Isn't that actually amazing?
Isn't it amazing? And then if we even take it a layer beyond that and we look at what you and I might look at, Bridget, which is a universal dynamic or a family dynamic or a soul dynamic or whatever it is, then we can also see that what we're going through is beautiful. And ultimately that's where we'll take this conversation, but I don't want to rush in there too soon. But just more at this point in time, just want to dot in here that the dis-ease or the illness that you're experiencing is health.
Yeah. It's just such a beautiful reframe. And I think for so many mothers who can sometimes fall into the trap of believing it's somehow their fault, right? That their child got this cold or got sick, or I didn't put enough layers on them, or, whatever, I didn't give them enough healthy food. Like pick your poison that you're going to punish yourself with.
Right.
That to actually look at, what if there's something really positive here for them, for me, for us? What if my thinking around this needs to expand?
Yeah. Yeah. And that gets to be really beautiful. So let's just begin with, we don't want you to feel so alone and feel so shamey. So I hope maybe we've talked about the shamey thing. Let's maybe move into the don't feel alone, homie.
Yeah. Yeah, because like my son had the last week off term of school pretty much. Most of our school holidays has probably been the most boring holidays like we've ever had, because it's just been a rolling sickness. He got it, then my daughter got it, then my other daughter got it, then I got sick, and then my husband got sick. And it's just a time for, a little bit like really surrendering to your own inner winter, of the family, and paring everything back to, what are the basics that we need right now to feel supported, to be able to give support. Can we also accept that our values might get challenged because we're not going to be maybe the parent, the ideal parent we want to be? Because if you've got a splitting COVID headache, then you can't hear your child. You can't be in the same room as them, for example. And so you're going to need to reconcile that part of you that might beat yourself up about that, right? And still see yourself as worthy and whole and lovable and just as perfect as you are over there when I idealize your healthy self.
Totally. And also just want to hone in on what you said, which is, I will say to you again, the larger your family, the more you're sick, because it's no longer just, we got sick and we're back at school in a week. No. What happens in a large family is it just rolls week by week for one person. So me as a family of 6, probably going to have sickness in my house for 6 weeks, because it's going to go from one child to the next, to the next, to the next, to me, to Nick, and I'll see you in 6 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you have a family of 3 and you have only one child, great, you'll be back at school in maybe 7 to 14 days. But don't go judging me for not being sick 6 weeks later when I have double the amount of family as you.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying this because this happens regularly.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, I just want to normalize the fact that the larger your family, the longer their period of sickness, because it rolls from one to the other. It's not bang, we all get sick in 7 days. Everyone might have a 7-day bug, but it rolls on 4 or 5 days after the next person. And as a family, you're sick for maybe 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as opposed to beating yourself up and going, oh my God, what's wrong? We're not doing it right. We've been sick for 2 months. There's been sickness in this house for 2 months. Because the thing is, it require you to stretch and expand, right? You think about you're sick for whatever period of time, the bigger your family, the longer that goes on for.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'll have to expand your capacity to tolerate that.
Right.
Rise to that.
Right. And just for you to normalize the fact that it's not like, oh my God, we're so unhealthy because we've been sick for 2 months, but instead to go, okay, this is actually exactly the same, just it's a longer period of time because there's more of us.
Yeah. And viruses are going to do what viruses do.
Yeah. Spread.
Spread.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you've got this winter, which the healthy one, might have gone back out, picked up something different.
Right.
By the time you go.
No, really, this happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, really, this happens. So when we're talking about, I want you to feel less alone, is just let go of so much of the like, oh my God, we're so unhealthy. We're not as healthy as that person who does not have kids at school, does not have kids in sport, does not have kids at swimming lessons, does not have that many kids, is not out in the community.
Or even yourself, right? Even yourself pre-kids or yourself with one child.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we're the worst at beating ourselves up in comparison to our earlier selves.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. It's true. So don't feel so alone. We're all in this together in the sense that whatever is going around the community is ultimately probably going to go through your family. And the bigger your family, the longer that period is. So that doesn't mean you're more or less healthy. That's just a function of numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a helpful reminder.
yeah, I just really like that was definitely something that I had to process over the years, was reconciling that experience in my own mind, because the first thing we do, of course, when we're in pain is compare.
Yeah. Yeah. which brings more pain, right?
Why can't I be like insert person, family that I see that is having the opposite experience of me? Well, because I have 2 or 3 times as many children.
Mm.
And because we do 2 or 3 times as many activities.
Yeah.
And would I change those things? No, because they're so wrapped up in my value system. So this is what it is, right? It's not all, it's not all light. You just get to choose it, you know, and don't make it mean something that it doesn't mean.
Yeah.
So you're not alone. We are all going through it. The number of children you have probably extends everything by a week. And as Bridget said, probably what happens is by the time it's on the last person, then first person's now got a new one.
Yeah.
And round we go the merry-go-round again.
Mm.
So part of that for me is letting go of the concept that there is a merry-go-round that you step off of.
Mm. How do you ride it better?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you accept that you're on it and not keep trying to get off it or avoid it?
Because it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And it's only painful when you make it mean something, when you attach it to something.
Yeah. And then there's a complexity, which I guess leads us into the next one a little bit, around the resentment.
Yeah.
Or the frustration.
Or the fear.
Yeah.
Mm.
The first two definitely can come up in terms of how am I going to clean this house, get my work done, and do X, Y, Z. And I want to acknowledge that's real, right? Like that's the real frustration. And that feeling of overwhelm, and that particularly if you're sick too, that part of you that is struggling with your emotional bandwidth.
Mm.
And when you're struggling with your emotional bandwidth, you're not able to have as much cognitive function, and you will react. And you will maybe go into self-protection or blame.
Totally.
Or whatever else, right, is your MO.
Yeah.
And to just soften into that experience, first of all, and just accept that that's where you are, right? Because if we're continually hating ourselves in that, then guess what we keep running into? More of that part of ourselves. So it's like, and I don't know about you, Jules, but it's like, okay, what's the bare minimum? Mm-hmm. What are the basic needs that need to be fulfilled here?
Totally, 100%.
What is the work that must get done? And what can I shift?
Yeah. What does that mean for you?
For me, it's really looking at, I mean, if I don't feel like if I can reasonably service clients, then I move clients. And I see that as permission giving too, because I think sometimes there can be a lot of ego wrapped into, well, I just need to show up.
Yeah.
And same goes for if you're an employee and you're running all the stories about what's your boss going to say or what's your workplace going to say, and you make that bigger than Ben-Hur. Same thing is to, really own where you are and claim where you are and claim where you're putting your service and your energy by acknowledging, I don't have the bandwidth for this right now.
Totally.
And I think if you're in service and for much of the time committed to that service, then you certainly get chances to lean back when you need to. When there are times when you simply can't service a client, for example, or you're not going to be able to launch the thing that you thought you could because you don't have either the childcare or the capacity, right?
Yeah, totally.
What would you say?
I just really loved, I just loved hearing you say that. I was like, yeah, totally, 100%. I loved your what are the basic needs, because that's totally the first question that I come back to is just the recognition of like, I don't perceive like the merry-go-round thing. I actually don't perceive that me as a large family actually ever gets off the merry-go-round, because there's usually, the way that it works in our household at least, it's like they take it in turns.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter, actually, whether we're talking about physical sickness or we're talking about mental, emotional health and sickness, or we're talking about school and social health and sickness, or, you know, place in the world or place in their bodies, or like,
yeah,
they're all
the form's just going to constantly change,
right?
Yeah.
So I don't actually, what I've come to realize is I don't actually ever get off the merry-go-round, just hopefully. And the way that it seems to work in a larger family, somehow in the universal dynamics, which I actually kiss the ground and grateful for, is that they just take it in turns.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare that it's everyone at the same time. Usually how it goes is there's years of focus in different children is what I notice. There's years of certain children where their needs and whatever they're traversing are greater than the needs of others within the family system.
Yeah.
Usually counterbalancing that in that same year is someone who doesn't need you at all. Right? I mean, this is the perfection of a family dynamic. Yeah. So I perceive there's years of higher need, and I can see that that actually cycles through my children as well, as well as there are seasons, months, weeks, and days. Like there's always a triage and there's always a dynamic. So what I love to do is just kind of lean back a little bit and watch that dynamic and just be like, okay, it's your turn now. And sometimes I love to be able to turn up to my school mum friends and be like, fuck me. Last week it was Heath. Now it's fucking Jade.
Yeah. And be frustrated with it. But
just
also
like go, of course I love my children. Of like, unquestionably, of course they're magnificent, and of course they're my top value, and also fuck this shit.
Yeah. I'm allowed to feel really pissed off with this.
And like come on.
I'm allowed to feel like I need a break.
Give me a break. You know.
Yeah.
I think that all of that is what builds capacity.
Yes.
As opposed to expecting myself to continuously meet with grace.
Yeah.
I actually really expect myself to have a beautiful daily balance of grace and fuck this shit.
Yeah. Well, isn't that health too, right? Like
exactly.
And it's how well, I think, a little bit like, you know, when we're talking about children developing their capacity for regulation, that resilience is built, how often you move from regulation to dysregulation and back again. Like our emotional capacity and flexibility comes from, you know, being able to go, fuck this shit. All right, what have I got to do? Like, you know, and like, just like you're allowed to have it. Like you're allowed to drop your bundle, and that's normal and human and healthy. And, you know, it's when we get into long episodes of that being one way, right?
Yes.
Then, you know, we look at, you know, bigger problems.
There's something else going on there, but health in and of itself is actually a fluid and flexible mix of that. I love that. Yeah. And actually I see that as a function, because as you were saying that, I'm like, I totally recognize that happens, that when I give myself the space to be like, and fuck this shit and fuck this kid and their problems right now, that after I do that dump, all of a sudden there's this extra space within me that's created.
Yeah. It's like a problem. It's like that saying, a problem shared is a problem halved.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually really mostly use my mum friends for that. Yeah. And I love that we can offer each other grace and without judgment. Like none of those women that I would turn up to, like I could turn up to you and Bridget, you and I like conscious parents, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But I could turn up to you and go, oh my God, fuck Heath and his fever.
Yeah.
I'm totally sick of it. Can he just be well? And you'd giggle like that and you'd be like, totes, man. Yeah.
Totally here.
Yeah. And you wouldn't think less of me and you wouldn't judge me and you wouldn't be going, oh, what a shit parent. Or you could be doing all of these things better. None of those things are helpful. But instead you're just like, yeah, I see the me in that. I totally see the release of what this is, which is just like, can I just blow some steam so I can come back? And you're like, yeah, you go, you do that. That's health.
Yeah.
It's not needing to be one way. So I can do that also because I give myself freedom to do that. Right here we are on a podcast and I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I don't expect that I am this Zen perfect mother on the podcast.
No,
and therefore can only be that out in the world. And then have a bigger nightmare behind closed doors.
Totally. And that's the one thing that you and I, certainly for having podcasted for so long and have, created communities and all of that, is that there's such value in bringing all of yourself so that there's nothing to hide. There's nothing
to hide. This is me.
Yeah.
I see you here. I see you down the street. Yeah. I see you, at the shopping center. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's not different. And that is also what allows you the freedom to have capacity to stay on the merry-go-round.
Because you're not like trying to stitch yourself up and fit yourself into this, straitjacket of acceptance.
And you're not like, yeah, I'm me when I'm off the merry-go-round. This isn't me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So normally what we do here is pop in and about what is happening in our worlds that you could join. But instead, what we really wanted to do is just send out a big stream of love from our hearts to yours and offer you just a little affirmation. So an affirmation from my heart to yours is just remember who you are and how much love exists around you.
And as you dance in your awareness through these polarities that we're talking through here, and the permission that we're giving you to embrace more of yourself and your children, I would love you to say to yourself, I am willing and open to seeing and owning all that I am.
So I just really loved that you had started with what are the basics, because the basics for me are just an internal recognition where I'm like, I need an hour with my mum friends where I can be like, blah. Okay, now what needs doing? And back I go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally. And then you can almost, in doing that, they act kind of like a listening partner in some ways, because in your blah, like you get to see the wood for the trees.
Yeah.
You see through it.
Right. And hopefully you have the right people around you and you're not like acquiescing and not having a vibrational match around you, because you are the sum of the people you spend the most time with. So hopefully you're cultivating a friendship circle where you can do that. Right.
Yeah.
And that's health. And that because I have cultivated that, whoever I do my blurt to, if I can't see the shit, they will, and I can trust that I can trust that. That sense of you are the last person who sees your shit.
Yeah.
But when you have people around you who truly love you and who truly want your best you in the world, then there's this part of you that lets go of your ego and trusts their reflection of you. So when they say you're out of integrity right now, you're like, yeah, fuck I am. This is going, yeah, fuck I am. Like we hire coaches for that for sure.
Yeah.
And also hopefully you have one or two people in your world who you could trust that reflection of.
And I mean, that's the job of the people around us, because they act as balances, right? Like everything around us is seeking to help us come into homeostasis.
Yeah.
And so, the psychology around us and within us, the sociology around us and within us, they're all forces that work to help us come back into connection with ourselves. And sometimes that's going to sound like, hey, like, you sure like that's what you really think or what you really want to be doing? Or like, what have you thought about this? And you go, oh, fuck, yeah, right, forgot about that. And it's humbling, but it's so important, right?
So important. So that coming back to basics for me is, okay, I got to make sure I've factored in some blurt time, because I can't just keep expanding like a balloon and holding and holding and holding and holding and never actually kind of letting out. There has to be an inhale and an exhale. So where am I exhaling is literally the back to basics. I mean, it's what nourishing the mother is we recognize that you have to nourish the mother as the central figure in the family for it to function well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back to basics is always, where am I exhaling? How can I map that in my week? Whatever that looks like. And then it's, and what do we need to get through a day? What do I need to get through a day and feel compassionate still by the end of the day? And for me, it's little things. I always think it's definitely food. Have I kind of got, it doesn't have to be great world-class food, but have I felt like I've at least provided one or two quality meals or quality intake in a day.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I need to set myself up for that? If I don't have that in the house, what do I need to do that? And then it's just keeping my environment in a way that reflects a version of me that I want to be with. So I might light the fire. I might have candles on. I might play music. When my kids are sick, they're not allowed to game. So then it's just, you're just watching a movie or you're asleep on bed, in bed, whatever it is. So I just really keep the environment lower stimulation and more sensual.
Yeah.
So how can I bring in things that feel really good? And even sick kids, if they're not totally flaked out, can still manage a 15-minute cleanup.
Yeah.
So we do still do a 15-minute, in inverted commas, hour of power. So it's just about managing what you need, I think, to feel really good when it comes back to basics. And that's what it is for me. And if I've had kids that are home from school, they know the other deal in our family is you go to bed early.
Yeah.
So even Heath, who's, doesn't have a bedtime, he chooses his own bedtime. He knows he's got to be in bed by 9. And for my younger girls, it's always a half an hour earlier. So my girls are still 7 and 7:30 and Jade's 8:30. So they all go to bed a half hour early. And certainly when my kids were little, like in kinder and earlier, it would have been probably 6:30 that I put them to bed.
Yeah.
And that also felt really good for me, because then I'm like, I have like literally a whole night.
Yeah. And that can be enough to get you through the day.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And the night, depending on where you're at with kids, right? So I loved your, what do you need to come back to basics? And for me, that's what it is.
I love that. Yeah, for me, I immediately go to, I need to have a, chicken cooking, I need to have a kind of constant broth going. And then I know that also, if I'm getting depleted towards the afternoon, there's a really simple dinner that's there that I can pull together.
It's a really good idea.
Because sometimes, especially...
Are you just doing your stock in the slow cooker?
Yeah. So I bring it to the boil on the stove and then put it in the slow cooker and I leave it.
I just got to ask you these questions. Are you browning the skin first, or you're just literally putting it in? Yeah.
I put it in. And then I leave it in the slow cooker for up to 24 hours. So it ends up being a delicious broth, but that it means I can even ladle stuff out of it, as it's, after the first sort of 4 or 5 hours. So it's almost being, a constant one I can pull from. And I really like that, because particularly if you're in this merry-go-round and you might start the day with one kid sick and then another one goes down.
Yeah.
Then you've got your safety net for nourishment. As opposed to
I actually love that. That's such a clever idea. I'm going to do that. I love it's almost like a continuous kombucha, only it's a continuous stock.
Yeah.
That's really clever.
Yeah, it works really well. Just this first winter that I've been doing it in the slow cooker, and it's so great.
Because my kids love that whole vermicelli noodle, and I just zoodle the carrots and the zucchini and the whatever, which takes 2 seconds, and they just throw in a bowl whatever they want and pour the stock on. It's a favorite meal in our house.
Such a good dinner. And you, yourself, when you feel sick, I'll even ladle a few spoons out and drink it, right?
Totes.
So, and especially if I haven't gone down yet.
Yeah. Yeah, totes.
Even psychosomatically, I feel like I'm doing all the right things.
Yes. And I would add, while we're on that, I actually always keep the, I think it's Nutrilife, do these delicious powdered stocks, but they're bone broths.
Yes.
And they're so good.
They're really good.
So good. They're chicken and beef powdered stocks. You just a good, heaped tablespoon of freaking delicious, shelf life. And then I do the same thing. So I love your idea of a fresh broth, totally going to do it. And also what is always in my cupboard is their packets of powdered bone broth, so that I can do exactly that.
Oh, so good. Just little hacks, right?
So good.
And two, because especially if you've got sick kids and you feel like you don't get a lot of a breath, just feeling like you're doing something that's, in inverted commas, right.
Yeah.
For your own self-care or your own health as you're taking care of others. I think it just helped you mentally.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. I would also say, while we're just having this, mum hacks, how do we actually do it thing, is I love Pinterest just for toddler ideas, but fuck me, a bit of warm Play-Doh.
Oh, yes, warm Play-Doh is the best.
And then once it's not warm anymore, give them some glitter bottles, off it goes for another 2 hours.
My kid, Pearl actually goes, I want it to be warm, because she loves the warm Play-Doh. So
yeah, but you can extend it, right? You start with warm.
Yeah.
Now when they're bored of that, just add in a new sensor. Here's a couple of bottle of glitters, and just let them open it themselves and do it themselves. Now you got glitter Play-Doh. When they're bored of that, how about some essential oils? Here you go. Now make it smell nice. So you could essentially stretch Play-Doh out across a whole day. You're done with that? Great. Let's cook with it. How do you want to do some, get out the cooking utensils, let them bake some cookie cutter things. And so keeping your play simple and extending it out. And in actual fact, when I was on a wildflower call a little while ago, I was talking to one of the mums on there about that. And I'm like, okay, I never throw anything out in my cupboard. So supplements that I've bought and actually don't like, I don't know, flowers and whatever things from your cupboard, I never throw them out. They just go to now play kitchen stuff. Mm-hmm. So go open your pantry and be like, what do I never cook with? What is past its use by date? What do I want to clean out of here? You're probably going to get a good 20 minutes per product.
It's so good. I do that with old flowers with Play-Doh, and then with psyllium husks to make slime.
Yes.
All this, especially if you end up buying good ingredients and then realize, oh no, that's out of date. You can it gets a whole new lease on life.
Yeah. Whole new list. I bought magnesium powders and spirulina, and they're gross. Well, they make amazing coffees in a play kitchen.
Totally.
Just box that shit up and save it for the rainy day, and know it's one product at a time that they play with, and you're going to get 20 minutes per product.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that.
So while we're mum hacking, let's just be don't make it hard. Just extend the sensory play.
Yeah.
Cook up some pasta and some spaghetti. Just keep it easy. It doesn't have to be hard in order for kids to be entertained.
Yeah. And I think that's what we need the reminders of when you're on that merry-go-round too. And you're often if you've been sick, you're stuck, your mental, you're not thinking about what could they play, or you fall out of the habit of creativity. And so these are great hacks.
Yeah. And even just those water paint books, that you can get from Kmart or a $2 shop or something. So good. No cleanup. Keep it easy on yourself.
And if you're super organized, have a stash of those things that you pull out when you're really desperate.
Yeah. And scissors. I always love scissors in a basket, because we could just sit outside and they could cut the grass, or they could cut the plants, or they could make potions. A pair of scissors in a basket goes a long way.
Yeah.
Chalk on the ground. Don't make it hard.
No, make it easy.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Where else are we at here? Have we normalised frustration, Bridget, do you think, or not?
I think we've said fuck enough times. We probably normalised frustration.
We hope what you've got out of it is just normalising your polarisations around being the perfect mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of being the perfect health vitalistic advocate. So just witnessing your polarizations that create, or it's your attachments that create your suffering, rather than the experience that you're actually in. And that will actually move on. Lovely segue to point number 3, which is what are myself and my child gaining from this? So if we just do that slight thing beyond our own personal moment and just be okay, what am I not seeing? What is the bigger why here? What's really going on here? And you just want to take that slightly higher-minded approach, which we're not always ready for, and that is fine. Don't go there if you're not ready.
This is just for when you're ready for it.
Yeah, right? And I would tell you something interesting is that every time I have needed to create a course, Lola, who's my hardest child, or certainly was, I'm not so sure now because Gwen's in a very needy, 4-year-old kinder stage. But Lola, certainly up until probably this year with all of the support, actually, she's doing amazing. So let's take Lola pre that, has always gotten gastro, which, what do they call it in the States? Flu. like the vomiting, diarrhea
like
kind of situation,
flu.
like a stomach flu. Yeah. Whenever I have needed to build a course or a program.
So your child.
What is interesting to me is that sick kids have never meant less work for me. They've actually meant more space for work.
Because they're not asking to do everything all the time.
Right. They're just flaked out, happy to just be touching me, like a head on my lap or a snuggle of the back against my side, you know, watching a movie or just sleeping. Like when they're flaked out like that with a fever and they don't want to move, I'm like, yes. I am so happy to sit here with my computer. Because otherwise what I'm normally doing is so active. Constant needs, constant cleaning, constant moving, constant activities, constant next thing. And instead, they're so sick, they don't want to move. Yes. This is a win. So what I find so fascinating, is I don't have the attachment of illness means less work for me.
Yeah.
Because my attachment actually is my kid's illness means, oh, thanks, universe, more space for me to work. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So I would say that because I remember when you first used to tell me about this, when I had really not had much experience with sick kids. And I was like, well, what do you mean you just do that? Like, don't you have to like watch them or because if you're like sickness fit, right? Like, and plus you're a health
professional. Love this conversation, Bridget. This is so good to hear.
Yeah, because, you're a health professional. So you also know the body and trust it. You know what it's doing.
So true. I remember these early conversations now where you were like, can you just teach me that comfort or that security?
Yeah, and I think because my mother still has a health anxiety. So like she'll like, even today, she's like, how's Hugo? Is he okay? Like, so that's my different. Right? My mother still feels terrible at leaving me at home when I was 14 and I had chickenpox. I was 14 and she felt terrible to go to work and not look after me when I had chickenpox. So that's that's a edge of anxiety, right? Yeah. So when you're anxious, you're not like chilled out doing your work. You're like,
no.
What's wrong with them? Should I like, what symptom is this? What does this mean? Right? Like you're doing that.
Yeah, totally.
So it takes practice to learn your child, to learn what different symptoms mean, to see your child's, typical signs and, just how they roll with different things, to have a level of confidence that, whatever, I'm just sitting here and you're just like flaked out half dead.
I just love that you said that because you're totally right. It is sick fit because let's just begin with the start of my health education was death.
Yeah. So you know death well, right?
I know death well.
You know everything that doesn't look like death.
Yeah, and I have been around death so much in my life. Like so much in my life, like even pre-dad getting sick. Weirdly around death a lot. Like even, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a story for another day. But I wonder sometimes whether this is the benefit, right? Like, how do I tolerate so much intensity of emotion and not feel scared? Well, because I had the tyrannical, ferocious, carnivorous mother who devoured me so many times, I stopped fearing it. Well, same thing with sickness. I've been around death and the end of life so much that I know it, I see it, I feel it. So I know when it's vital.
Yes. So you're seeing the vitality even in the, child who's barely moving.
Yes.
Up, right?
Yes. So I really love that you said that because quite right. Good reminder for me to self-check that when I'm just like, no, they're fine. Yes, because I know how to read them that they're fine. And I get that if you don't, that would create anxiety.
And that also that, we still live in a very fever-fearing mainstream culture. Like, I don't give Panadol. I watch a fever. I trust but that's not common, right?
No.
And that takes practice and that takes, understanding and like, having health professionals around you who you can
learn from
and learn from. And that doesn't come with your first child and the first time they're sick. It doesn't happen.
No, that's true. 100% true.
So, if that is you and you are that parent and you are anxious about the work and you are anxious at all the things that are not getting done, then, that I see you. And I think too, that's where you want to look at, okay, who can I have in my corner that, that is, if it's not a family GP, is it a family osteo or a chiropractor, or that someone just helps me feel like I've got some support?
Yeah.
Because it can be scary when you're traversing these places that you haven't been before, or you have people around you who second guess what you're doing or your choices.
Yeah.
And you then have to go, shit, like, where am I really here? Is this okay? Who can I call on? And then you go, okay, I feel okay now. I can relax, because the anxiety can be really real.
100%. Yeah. Totally.
So I love that we can explore both of those polarities, right?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. And so if we're then looking at, because I have had a few conversations actually in reimagining motherhood lately about, with mothers being worried about their kids getting sick and, feeling anxious about them not wearing enough clothes or not sleeping enough and all of that kind of stuff, and feeling almost like bad if their kid gets sick and they miss out on things. But I would also look at, certainly, Rudolf Steiner's approach and, his anthroposophic medicine always viewed fevers as coming with things, right? Like that there's a developmental leap that you often see a young child take after they've had a fever, and that these are not phases in a child's life where nothing's happening. Actually, under the surface, enormous things are happening. And they are enabled to happen when the child slows down enough, and when there is a conservation of resources, and when there is a really purposeful cellular death for some cells, right? And, a birth for others. And, that there's something that we can't see, but that is happening, and that may well be what that child needs developmentally, right? Like the child who comes out of a sickness and starts walking, or has all these new words. Like, what if we could trust there's something in them that is growing here? Even with my son, like when he had the 4 days off school, and like, I'm still running my other two around, and he was okay, right? So I'm like, okay, but this is kind of not what I was planning, but you're gonna be okay at home on your own, right? Because he's at the age now, he's 9, and I haven't really left him at home because he hasn't wanted to be home alone, but he's now at the point where he doesn't care because he's so sick, and I'm like, I can't really take you because it's not best for you to come out or to go here. And so he is like now super fine with being left home alone, and that was an initiation period that he went through when he was sick that he wouldn't have had to experience over and over and over again in such a short amount of time, but that he did, and that he now has a resilience and a capability and a willingness to do. So there's the growth.
I love it.
And so I
didn't know that about Steiner. You said Steiner, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, they see like, and they see certain childhood illnesses as like developmental illnesses. They're not like these things we should be afraid of, and the fevers aren't these things that we should be terrified of, but that
how fascinating
they have a function for the development. Because if you imagine, like in Steiner philosophy, there's a slow landing of the soul in the body. It happens slowly over a period of time, and so the sickness also facilitates the landing of that soul in the body, because there's something that happens in that interplay with a child being sick and that, like, kind
bonding.
Of force. Yeah, I mean, Steiner trained people will tell me how to say that better than what I just said then, but that there's something in that kind of incarnating child, that when they get sick, there's something deeper and more meaningful and spiritual about it.
That's so fascinating. I love it.
Yeah.
How interesting just to ponder.
Yeah. And to then look at, like, as you and I do when we're like coaching and working through our own stuff or with each other, is that question of, why this and why now? So why this sickness with this child and why right now as well? is there some anxiety? Is there some, other things that they're not like, quite ready to grow into right now, and that this shields them from, what other things could be happening?
What are the benefits? What are we gaining? How are we benefiting both for my child and for myself? Is just an excellent line of questioning to just go beyond a little bit and look at this as something that's on the way, not in the way, which often just allows us to relax into it a little bit more, doesn't it?
And the more I think too, if we attach to like our child needing to be well and like that's where their worth is and this is just a waste of time, then we don't slow down enough to find the richness in it. And we get afraid of it happening again, which often breeds it then again. And our child doesn't, from our modeling, doesn't necessarily see the value either of the slowing down, the letting the body do what it needs to do, right? And like I'd say to them, that's a disservice, because we live in a culture which is like, take your cold drill, soldier on, like turn up at work. Like, I mean, not so much now since
COVID. I think COVID has changed that.
Well, COVID has smashed that more because people just don't want to get sick from someone else. I don't.
Yes, but now you're like the great leper if you have a cough or a snotty nose.
Totally. But it's still from the place of don't give that to me. It's not from the slow down, trust the body to move through a sickness kind of angle. It's still a capitalistic bent on it, right?
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So sounds like Bridget's voice has just about had enough. So we're going to wrap up this conversation, and we really hope that you've got something beautiful out of it. If you have, we would love to hear from you. If you have 5 seconds, please rate us on iTunes or leave a review on Facebook or iTunes. It'd be really great. If you have a question or something that you would love for us to dive deep into, then please reach out to us at Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. And bridgetwood.life. What's your email?
hello@bridgetwood.life.
Right. Or julietenner.love. And you can email me at hello@julietenner.love. So if you do have questions, then we would love to hear them. And we may even take those into a podcast episode and answer it for you in a more integrated way. So please definitely reach out. And what have you got going on in the world, Bridget?
I am moving through all things chaos to clarity. So this is what's happening in Reimagining Motherhood at the moment. So kind of looking at what chaos is for each of us in our lives and how it shows up, how to build kind of resilience towards moving with it. And I think that this topic lends itself to that. And to see it as not kind of this holy grail of clarity that we get to, but actually a little bit like regulation and dysregulation. How do we build a willingness and a capacity to do the dance and to continually go there, find its richness, come back, move forward. So that's what we're doing at the moment in there.
Love it. That sounds so good.
Yeah, it's fun.
And bridgetwood.life, we find out.
Yes, bridgetwood.life.
Yes. Well, I actually feel like I'm in a bit of a pause at the moment. So I'm just pulling together an updated, revised and new version of Queen School. And it's a Queen School Honey Club integration. And I'm just doing the final touches on that at the moment. So again, not quite ready to release yet. But stay tuned, and it will be. And it's the next level elevation of that experience that I have really spent, as you know, Bridgie, this whole year tearing shit apart, going, how can I do this better? How can I reach the people that are struggling with the way that it has been? And certainly for me in my containers, and as you know, Bridgie, I have always had this rip the Band-Aid off kind of energy. And I'm certainly learning. I think slowness is always my learning. And this year I've really been looking at how do I slow it down so that the changes that I create for people, or that I offer the opening or the doorway that they swing open for the change in their life, is a better way of saying that, can reach people with neurodiversity, can reach mothers who are stretched, give you a variety of options for how you learn and integrate best, don't have to be just on Facebook. So all of these ways that I could see were struggle points for people that I'd worked with, I've been spending all year kind of pulling it apart and asking, how can I help you better? So it's been a really long process for me. I mean, what are we in? July? now, and I'm only just coming to the end of finishing that. So I am really excited to change the format and the way that I work with women in those changes, and certainly couples too. And I'm really excited to be able to reach people who have always felt more marginalized in spaces of learning. So people with neurodiversity, and certainly as I've moved through that process of my own child, and you see things you've never seen before, and you learn things you've never known before. And so I'm really grateful actually to my year with Ola for what she's taught me. And this is why it's so beautiful, isn't it? That whatever the challenges are that our children reveal to us will become and are on the path, right? Like so much of that felt like a part-time job that I had to like try and work out how to fit in, and it was fucking brutal, and the mental load, like awful. And yet through all of that, now I can see this golden thread that was always trying to teach me. It just taught me through my highest value. Do you know what I mean?
So beautiful, isn't it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I just have this heart softness now where I'm like, fuck, I can see all the ways I did not offer honouring spaces to people with neurodiversity. And that's certainly something that I want to change, because people like my Lola are equally as worthy for the changes that any of us are. Yeah. They just need slightly different conditions, and that's equity over equality. And I totally want to do that. So it's been a really long, slow stretching phase for me that I'm really like feeling really good about, again, still slowing down and just coming to this place of feeling good about, but it's not quite ready yet. So I can't tell you about it yet.
That's great though. Sounds exciting.
I hope so. So you can stay tuned at julietenner.love, and I will let you know.
And remember to nourish someone to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.